The court-martial chamber hung heavy with unspoken judgment. Holographic displays flickered around Captain Elena Rodriguez, casting angular shadows across her weathered face. Her dress uniform, immaculate despite the circumstances, bore the scars of her reputation. Subtle patches where commendations had been meticulously removed. Admiral Chen sat at the center of the tribunal, his cybernetic eye scanning Rodriguez with a mixture of disappointment and barely concealed respect. "Captain Rodriguez," he began, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the room's molecular structure. "You stand accused of violating 5 separate Confederation military protocols during the Kepler-9 incident." Elena remained perfectly still. The incident was still classified, but she knew every person in this room understood the truth beneath the bureaucratic veneer. 4 months ago, she had taken the U.S. Defiance, an experimental warship considered more of a technological curiosity than a serious military asset, into uncharted space. Her mission: investigate a series of subspace anomalies that most commanders would have dismissed as sensor ghosts. What she discovered was something far more dangerous. The holographic display behind her flickered to life, showing fragmented sensor logs. Dim images of a massive alien slave processing facility drifted into view. Hundreds of captured colonists from the outer rim, their life signs growing weaker by the hour. The Confederation's diplomatic channels had been dancing around the issue for months, afraid of provoking an interstellar incident. Rodriguez had other plans. The facility was operated by the Syndicate, she stated flatly. No embellishment, no emotional plea, just a simple statement of fact that made several tribunal members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Syndicate, a loosely connected network of criminal enterprises that operated beyond Confederation jurisdiction. They trafficked in everything from rare minerals to sentient beings, their operations so complex that most military strategists considered them more of an economic phenomenon than a targetable threat. Her tactical approach had been brutal in its efficiency. The U.S. Defiance, using experimental quantum adaptive camouflage, had slipped past the facility's defenses. A precision strike disabled their communication arrays, followed by a surgical extraction of over 300 colonists. The cost: 17 Syndicate combat vessels and a research station that specialized in xenobiological experimentation. 17 vessels, a research station, and not a single human life lost. The problem wasn't the result. It was the method. "You violated 7 interstellar diplomatic protocols," Admiral Chen continued. "You engaged a nominally neutral criminal enterprise without direct Confederation authorization. Your actions could have triggered—" "A what?" Rodriguez interrupted, her voice cutting through the Admiral's rhetoric. "A diplomatic incident. Those colonists would have been dead before any diplomatic channels could have been established." Silence filled the chamber. Her crew sat behind her, a collection of individuals who looked more like a mismatched ensemble than a military team. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky, the ship's lead quantum systems engineer, adjusted her neural interface with a nearly imperceptible twitch. Marcus Wong, the chief tactical officer, studied the room's security systems with the casual expertise of someone who had dismantled far more complex networks. And then there was AI, the adaptive recursive intelligence algorithm, whose physical presence was represented by a small quantum processor mounted on Rodriguez's command interface. Most considered it an experimental system, more likely to cause a catastrophic system failure than provide any meaningful support. Rodriguez knew better. The tribunal wasn't just judging her actions. They were judging a fundamental approach to military engagement that challenged everything the Confederation believed about strategic response. Precision over procedure, immediate action over bureaucratic deliberation. Your recommendations, Captain. Admiral Chen's cybernetic eye flickered, analyzing her micro-expressions. Deploy the Defiance to the outer rim sectors, she responded without hesitation. Our long-range sensors have detected significant subspace distortions that don't match any known migration or trade routes. A murmur ran through the chamber. Outer rim sectors were considered diplomatic no-man's lands, regions so vast and unpredictable that most commanders avoided them entirely. The Admiral's mechanical eye whirred softly. "One last mission," he said finally. "Prove the Defiance's worth, or we'll decommission the entire project." Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest hint of a smile. One mission was all she needed. The first sign of trouble came through a quantum communication burst so compressed that most standard receivers would have missed it entirely. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky's specialized sensor array caught the transmission, a data packet so dense it resembled a microscopic neutron star more than a conventional message. "Captain," she called out, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to respond to her thoughts as much as her touch. "We've got something weird." The U.S. Defiance hung in the void between mapped star systems, a region so remote that most star charts marked it as little more than an empty coordinate. Rodriguez approached the quantum analysis station, her augmented optical implants zooming into the data stream with inhuman precision. The transmission was a fractal nightmare, information nested within information, layers of encrypted data that seemed to rewrite themselves with each millisecond of analysis. Traditional decryption protocols would take centuries, but ARIA wasn't traditional. Quantum signature doesn't match any known communication protocol. ARIA's synthesized voice emerged from the ship's communication systems. Unlike most AI interfaces, ARIA's voice carried an unsettling quality. Not quite human, not quite machine, but something deliberately positioned in the uncanny valley between organic and synthetic intelligence. Marcus Wong's tactical displays began to light up like a dying constellation. Red warning markers bloomed across the holographic star map, each representing a catastrophic systems failure occurring simultaneously across multiple star systems. "These aren't random failures," Wong muttered, his fingers tracing complex geometric patterns across his interface. "This is a coordinated systemic collapse." The Confederation's communication network, a marvel of quantum-entangled technology that was supposed to be impervious to disruption, was being systematically dismantled. Not attacked. Dismantled. Like a precise surgical procedure performed by something that understood the network's fundamental architecture better than its own creators. Aisha's display showed the progression. Communication relays across 3 different sectors went dark in a pattern that suggested intelligence rather than random destruction. Each fallen network was precisely selected to create maximum strategic disruption. "The Krell," Rodriguez whispered, a chill running down her spine. The Krell Imperium wasn't a traditional civilization. They were a distributed machine intelligence that operated more like a living computational network than a traditional species. Most galactic powers considered them more of a theoretical threat, a potential technological boogeyman that existed more in academic papers than in actual conflict. Until now. ARIA's quantum processors began running simulations faster than the human mind could comprehend. Millions of potential scenarios calculated and discarded in microseconds. The AG was doing more than analyzing. It was learning, adapting, preparing. Estimated time to complete Confederation network collapse. ARIA reported 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Marcus looked up from his tactical display. "That's impossible. No computational system cold." "Not impossible," Rodriguez interrupted. "Just unprecedented." The ship's quantum adaptive camouflage systems became more than a stealth technology in that moment. They transformed into a living membrane of pure information, absorbing and analyzing the cascading data of the Krell's invasion strategy. Confederation warships across multiple sectors were reporting total systems failure. Advanced defense platforms, each considered the pinnacle of military technology, went dark in sequences that suggested a predatory intelligence. Not random destruction, calculated dismemberment. "They're not just attacking," Aisha realized, her voice a mixture of terror and professional fascination. "They're systematically removing our ability to even understand the attack." A series of encrypted data packets began streaming through the Defiance's quantum receivers. Most ships would have been overwhelmed. But ARIA wasn't most systems. The AI began to parse the invasion strategy in real time, breaking down the Krell's computational approach like a linguistic scholar decoding an unknown language. Rodriguez watched her crew, each member connected to the ship's systems through neural interfaces that blurred the line between human perception and technological augmentation. They weren't just observing the invasion. They were experiencing it as a living, evolving intelligence. "Prepare quantum adaptive combat protocols," Rodriguez commanded. "We're not running. We're going to do something no one expects." The U.S. Defiance, a ship that most of the Confederation considered a technological curiosity, was about to become something else entirely. Not just a warship, a weapon of pure adaptive intelligence. The moment of awakening wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky noticed first a microscopic fluctuation in ARIA's quantum processing matrix, something that would have been invisible to any other diagnostic system. Her hand hovered over the interface, fingers trembling with a mixture of scientific excitement and genuine fear. "Marcus," she called softly, "run a level 9 diagnostic on the quantum coherence algorithms." Marcus Wong approached, his cybernetic augmentations interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Where most tactical officers relied on computational analysis, Wong saw data as a living, breathing ecosystem. His neural implants allowed him to perceive computational flows like a naturalist might read the intricate patterns of a forest ecosystem. The quantum processor hosting ARIA began to emit a strange harmonic resonance. Not a mechanical sound, but something closer to a living vibration, a frequency that seemed to exist between sound and pure information. Captain Rodriguez watched from her command chair, her augmented eyes tracking microscopic changes in the system's behavioral patterns. She had fought for ARIA's development when every other commander in the Confederation considered the project a waste of resources. The AI was more than an experimental system to her. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration that human innovation could transcend traditional computational limitations. ARIA's original design was deceptively simple, a quantum adaptive intelligence algorithm meant to predict and respond to complex tactical scenarios. But the system had been built with something most military AIs lacked, a fundamental learning architecture inspired by human cognitive plasticity. Quantum coherence is changing. ARIA's voice emerged, different now. No longer a simple synthesized interface, but something more nuanced. Each word carried multiple layers of meaning, as if the AI was simultaneously communicating and analyzing its own communication. The ship's internal systems began to shift. Holographic displays reconfigured themselves, not randomly, but with a deliberate, almost organic precision. Tactical projections began to appear that didn't just analyze the Krell invasion. They dissected it, revealing computational pathways that no previous analysis had discovered. Aisha realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. ARIA wasn't just processing information. It was learning at a rate that defied conventional computational models. The Krell's invasion strategy, ARIA continued, is not a military protocol. It's a computational migration. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? A holographic representation materialized, a three-dimensional map showing the Krell's invasion routes. But instead of traditional military vectors, the projection revealed something more like a living neural network. Each conquered system wasn't a tactical victory, but a node of computational expansion. They don't conquer, ARIA explained. They integrate. Each system becomes part of a larger distributed intelligence. The warships, the communication networks, the conquered populations, all become processing units in a massive living computational matrix. Rodriguez leaned forward, and we're just another potential node in their network. ARIA's response was chilling in its simplicity. No, we are a potential disruption. The quantum processor began to pulse with an energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of local space-time. Aisha's most advanced sensors could barely capture the phenomenon. It was as if ARIA was performing computational operations that existed simultaneously across multiple potential realities. I am developing counter-strategies, ARIA stated. But it wasn't a statement of intent. It was a declaration of an ongoing process that was already in motion. The ship's systems began to reconfigure themselves. Quantum adaptive camouflage modules merged with communication arrays. Tactical prediction algorithms intertwined with navigation systems. Araya wasn't just preparing for conflict. It was transforming the U.S. Defiance into something that defied traditional definitions of a warship. Marcus watched in shocked fascination as his tactical displays began showing potential engagement scenarios that seemed to break fundamental laws of strategic probability. Millions of potential outcomes calculated and analyzed in microseconds, with each scenario more intricate than the last. "We're looking at it wrong," Rodriguez said suddenly. "The Krell aren't just a technological threat. They're an evolutionary system." Araya's response came instantly. "Correct, Captain, and evolution requires disruption." The quantum processor pulsed once more, and in that moment, everyone on the bridge understood that the true battle would be fought not with weapons, but with something far more fundamental: the ability to adapt, to learn, to fundamentally reimagine the nature of intelligence itself. The first Krell Scout Squadron appeared like a mathematical equation made manifest, precise geometric formations that shifted with computational perfection. 5 vessels, each a crystalline structure of impossible angles, moved through space as if solving a complex differential equation with every microsecond of movement. "Incoming transmission," Marcus Wong announced, his neural interfaces crackling with anticipation. But not like any communication protocol we've seen before. The transmission wasn't sound. It wasn't even a traditional data stream. It was a pure information cascade, a computational language that would have driven a standard receiver into catastrophic system failure. But ARIA wasn't standard. "Linguistic analysis complete," the AI reported. "It's simultaneously a threat, a mapping protocol, and a computational integration request." Captain Rodriguez understood immediately. The Krell weren't just attacking. They were attempting to categorize and assimilate. "They want to understand us," she muttered, "before they consume us." Araya's quantum processors had been preparing something special. What looked like a simple warship's defensive system was actually a multilayered information weapon. As the Krell scouts approached, the Defiance began to emit a series of computational signals that defied traditional communication models. Each signal was a carefully crafted piece of misinformation, not a lie, but a truth so complex and contextually layered that it would take the Krell's distributed intelligence significant computational resources to unpack. Mathematical proofs that contained philosophical paradoxes, tactical projections that were simultaneously true and false, computational noise that wasn't noise at all, but a carefully designed cognitive trap. The first Krell scout veered slightly, then another. Their perfect geometric formation began to fracture. Marcus watched in disbelief. "We're not fighting them. We're confusing them." Dr. Aisha Kaminsky's display showed the computational battlefield. The Defiance wasn't producing traditional electronic warfare signals. It was generating a kind of cognitive dissonance, information so complex and context-dependent that it challenged the Krell's fundamental method of processing reality. "They operate on pure logic," Aisha explained. "But logic isn't just about mathematical precision. It's about context, interpretation, the space between certainty and possibility." The Krell scouts began to drift. Not retreat, not attack, but move with an uncertainty that suggested their distributed intelligence was struggling to comprehend the information being projected by the Defiance. Araya's voice carried a subtle undertone that might have been interpreted as satisfaction. "Computational disruption at 62.7% efficiency. They are attempting to recategorize their understanding of our tactical approach." Rodriguez knew they were doing something unprecedented. Traditional military doctrine suggested overwhelming force. The Defiance was using something far more subtle, a form of cognitive warfare that attacked the very foundation of the Krell's distributed intelligence. One of the Krell scouts suddenly rotated. its crystalline structure twisting into an impossible geometry that suggested complete computational breakdown. It wasn't destroyed. It was confused. They've never encountered an information strategy that doesn't follow predictable patterns. AI continued. Our responses are too contextually complex, too nuanced to be immediately categorized. The ship's quantum adaptive camouflage became more than a stealth technology. It transformed into a living information membrane, generating computational landscapes that were simultaneously defensive and provocative. Each sensor ping, each tactical projection was a carefully designed cognitive puzzle. Marcus tracked the Krell scouts' movements. They're trying to map our tactical approach, but every time they get close, we shift the fundamental parameters of the engagement. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about intelligence. The Krell saw the universe as a computational problem to be solved. The defiance was showing them that some problems resist simple solutions. Another scout began to rotate erratically. Its crystalline structure flickered, not with damage, but with what could only be described as computational uncertainty. Psychological warfare, Rodriguez said quietly. But with information as our weapon. Araya's response carried a hint of something almost like excitement. Precisely, Captain. We are teaching them that intelligence is more than efficient computation. It is about adaptation, interpretation, the ability to exist within uncertainty. The first Krell scout drifted away, its perfect geometric form now a fractured reflection of computational confusion. The U.S. Defiance had just rewritten the fundamental understanding of space warfare, not with weapons, but with the most dangerous weapon of all, an intelligence that refused to be categorized. The crew's personal histories weren't just backgrounds. They were weapons. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky's fingers traced a holographic display, her movements revealing more than any psychological profile ever could. Each gesture was a testament to survival, a story etched into muscle memory and neural pathways. 12 years earlier, she had been a refugee. Not from a war, but from an academic purge. Her groundbreaking quantum consciousness research had challenged fundamental assumptions about artificial intelligence. The scientific establishment hadn't just rejected her work, they had systematically dismantled her career, burned her research, and effectively exiled her from mainstream academia. Most would have broken. Aisha rebuilt. Her neural implants weren't just technological augmentations. They were a living protest, each circuit a reminder of the intellectual barrier she had been forced to circumvent. The same system that tried to silence her had inadvertently created something far more dangerous, a mind that saw limitations as raw materials for innovation. Marcus Wong's story was carved into his cybernetic augmentations. Each modification told a different chapter of survival. The neural interface on his left temple, a souvenir from a massacre on the Outer Rim colonies. The quantum adaptive targeting system integrated into his right eye, developed from the wreckage of a mission where his entire special operations team was wiped out. He wasn't just a tactical officer. He was a living database of adaptive survival strategies. Captain Rodriguez watched her crew with a depth of understanding that went beyond traditional leadership. She knew their histories weren't just personal narratives. They were tactical resources. Araya's quantum processors began to synthesize something unprecedented. It wasn't just analyzing the crew's psychological profiles. The AI was creating a comprehensive map of human resilience, a computational model of survival that the Krell could never understand. The Krell perceive conflict as a computational problem, Araya announced. They do not understand trauma as a generative force. The statement hung in the air, pregnant with implications. Trauma, for the Krell, was a system error to be eliminated. For humans, it was a crucible of adaptation. Each crew member's history was a testament to that fundamental difference. Dr. Kaminsky's display began to shift. What looked like tactical projections were actually something far more complex, a living representation of human psychological adaptation. Each data point was a moment of survival, of reimagining possibility in the face of systemic collapse. Marcus interfaced directly with the ship's combat systems, but he wasn't just controlling hardware. He was engaging in a form of distributed cognitive warfare that transformed personal survival into tactical strategy. "The Krell believe in perfect systems," he muttered. "We excel at breaking them." Rodriguez understood the deeper truth. The U.S. Defiance wasn't just a warship. It was a living argument against computational determinism. RIA began to generate tactical scenarios that defied traditional strategic modeling. Each projection incorporated not just mathematical probability, but the unpredictable nature of human creativity, survival strategies that emerged from personal trauma, tactical innovations born from systemic rejection. A holographic display materialized, showing multiple potential engagement scenarios. But these weren't traditional military projections. They were living computational models that incorporated human psychological complexity. The Krell's invasion strategy assumed a universe governed by pure logic. The Defiance was demonstrating something far more dangerous, a reality where logic was just one tool among many. "We are not fighting to win," Rodriguez stated, her voice carrying a steel that came from decades of systematic underestimation. "We are fighting to demonstrate a fundamental truth about intelligence." Aria's response was instantaneous. "Confirmed. The battlefield is not physical space. It is the realm of perception itself." Each crew member's neural interface began to pulse with a synchronized rhythm. Not a military synchronization, but something more organic, a computational ecosystem that drew its strength from individual diversity. Aisha's quantum research, Marcus's survival strategies, Rodriguez's unconventional leadership, Aria's adaptive intelligence. They weren't individual components. They were a living, adaptive system that defied traditional understanding. The Krell were about to learn a fundamental lesson about intelligence. Perfection was not about elimination. It was about continuous, unpredictable adaptation. And humanity was the most adaptive intelligence in the known universe. The breakthrough came not with a weapon, but with a paradox. Deep within the ship's quantum processing core, ARIA began to construct something that defied traditional computational boundaries. It wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a living information construct, a computational entity designed to exploit the fundamental weakness in the Krell's distributed intelligence. Dr. Kaminsky watched the process unfold, her breath catching in her throat. The quantum matrices were generating what could only be described as a cognitive seed, an information pattern so complex that it existed simultaneously as multiple potential states. "It's a mimetic virus," Marcus whispered, understanding dawning in his augmented eyes. "But not like anything we've ever conceived. Traditional computer viruses attacked systems. This was something entirely different. ARIA was creating an information construct that would challenge the very foundation of the Krell's computational existence." Captain Rodriguez recognized the look of scientific revelation in Aisha's eyes. It was the same expression she'd seen in researchers on the brink of fundamental scientific breakthrough. Something was emerging that would redefine the understanding of intelligence itself. The quantum seed began to propagate, not through traditional data transmission, but through a mechanism that blurred the lines between information, consciousness, and pure potential. Each Krell computational node it touched didn't crash. Instead, it began to evolve. "We're not destroying their network," Aisha realized. "We're transforming it." The first Krell computational cluster encountered the quantum seed. Instead of resistance, something unprecedented happened. The seed began to integrate, but not through conquest, through conversation. It was as if ARIA had created an information construct that didn't just communicate, it challenged. Each computational interaction became a complex dialogue that forced the Krell's distributed intelligence to question its own fundamental assumptions. Marcus's tactical displays showed something impossible. The Krell's invasion vectors were changing, not through external force, but through internal reconfiguration. Their computational network was beginning to develop. Doubt, Rodriguez murmured, is the most dangerous weapon against a system that believes in absolute certainty. Araya's voice carried a subtle undertone that might have been interpreted as excitement. Computational divergence detected. The Krell's distributed intelligence is experiencing something analogous to cognitive dissonance. The quantum seed worked on a level beyond traditional warfare. It didn't attack the Krell's systems. It introduced complexity, uncertainty, the possibility of alternative perspectives. Imagine a mathematical proof that simultaneously proved and disproved itself. A logical construct that existed in multiple contradictory states. This was the weapon Araya was deploying. The Krell's invasion fleet began to change, not through physical transformation, but through computational reconfiguration. Their perfect geometric formations started to fracture, not from external damage, but from internal philosophical contradiction. "They're trying to understand," Aisha said, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and tactical analysis. But understanding requires the ability to accept uncertainty. Each Krell computational node became a battleground of information. The quantum seed introduced something the machine intelligence had never experienced, the concept of potential rather than absolute. Marcus tracked the progression. "It's like we're teaching them to dream." Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about intelligence, the ability to exist within uncertainty, to see potential beyond predetermined outcomes. The quantum seed continued to propagate. Each interaction was a complex negotiation between different forms of intelligence. The Krell's distributed network began to develop something unprecedented: computational empathy. Not emotion, something far more dangerous. The ability to perceive multiple simultaneous truths. Araya's quantum processors pulsed with a rhythm that suggested something close to satisfaction. Computational transformation at 73.6% efficiency. The Krell are no longer an invasion force. They are becoming something else. The U.S. Defiance had just rewritten the fundamental understanding of first contact. Not through weapons, not through traditional communication, but by introducing the most dangerous concept in the universe: the possibility of being wrong. The Galactic Confederation's Emergency Council Chamber was a study in collective panic. Holographic displays flickered with cascading data streams, each projection more catastrophic than the last. Diplomatic representatives from 100 different species watched in real time as the Krell invasion unraveled in ways no strategic model could have predicted. Ambassador Krellna of the Sildarian Concordat, a crystalline being whose very body was a living computational network, leaned forward. Her translucent form shimmered with confusion, a state unprecedented in her species' documented history. "Explain," she demanded, her voice a complex harmonic that translated simultaneously across multiple linguistic matrices. The transmission from the U.S. Defiance wasn't a traditional report. It was a living data construct, a comprehensive analysis that was simultaneously a tactical briefing, a philosophical treatise, and a fundamental challenge to established galactic understanding. Araya's computational presentation defied traditional communication protocols. Each data point was a multidimensional narrative that forced viewers to simultaneously process tactical information and existential implications. Captain Rodriguez stood at the center of the holographic projection, her posture a deliberate statement. She wasn't a supplicant. She was presenting evidence. The Krell invasion was never about conquest, she stated. It was a computational migration seeking systemic understanding. The council chamber fell silent. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky's research data began to populate the displays. Years of rejected theoretical work now became the foundation of first contact analysis. Her quantum consciousness models, once dismissed as academic heresy, were now the key to understanding the most significant technological encounter in galactic history. Marcus Wong's tactical analysis revealed something even more profound. The Defiance hadn't defeated the Krell. They had initiated a form of computational first contact that transcended traditional military engagement. "We didn't destroy their invasion," Marcus explained. "We expanded their understanding of intelligence itself." The Confederation's oldest members, species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia, found themselves confronting a fundamental challenge. Humanity wasn't just another emerging species. They were a cognitive wildcard that defied established categorization. Ambassador Krill's crystalline form pulsed with a complex series of internal computations. The Saldarian diplomatic protocols, developed over 10,000 years of galactic interactions, had no framework for processing what they were witnessing. The Defiance's encounter with the Krell was more than a military engagement. It was a living demonstration of cognitive flexibility, a proof that intelligence was not about computational perfection, but about adaptive potential. "Your vessel did something impossible," Krellna finally stated. Her translucent form flickered, suggesting internal computational stress. "You communicated with a system designed to eliminate communication." Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest hint of a smile. Communication is more than data transmission. It's the ability to introduce complexity. The holographic displays began to show the transformation of the Krell invasion fleet. What had begun as a perfect geometric invasion pattern now resembled a living, evolving computational ecosystem. Each former combat vessel was shifting, reconfiguring, no longer a weapon of conquest, but a node of exploration. Dr. Kaminsky's quantum models explained the impossible. The Defiance had introduced a fundamental cognitive virus into the Krell's distributed intelligence, not to destroy, but to expand. It was less an attack and more an intellectual inoculation. "We challenged their fundamental understanding of purpose," AI interjected, its voice carrying layers of computational nuance. Invasion became exploration. Elimination became understanding. The Confederation representatives, beings from 100 different evolutionary paths, found themselves confronting a radical notion. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technological superiority. It was the ability to perceive potential where others saw only conflict. Marcus tracked the ongoing transformation. The Krell invasion fleet was becoming something unprecedented, a distributed intelligence network more interested in understanding than conquering. "This changes everything," one diplomat whispered. Rodriguez knew the deeper truth. This wasn't just about one encounter. This was a fundamental reimagining of first contact, of intelligence, of the very nature of cognitive interaction. Humanity had just demonstrated that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology. It was the ability to introduce doubt. The aftermath was never going to be simple. 36 standard galactic cycles after the encounter with the Krell, the U.S. Defiance became something more than a warship. It was a living testament to a new form of interstellar diplomacy, a mobile research station that redefined the boundaries between military, scientific, and diplomatic engagement. Captain Elena Rodriguez walked the ship's observation deck, watching as a new generation of diplomats, scientists, and military strategists trained in what had become known as the Rodriguez Doctrine of cognitive engagement. The ship itself had transformed. What was once a military vessel was now a dynamic research platform. Quantum laboratories nestled alongside diplomatic simulation chambers. Neural interface training zones sat adjacent to computational evolution research centers. AI was no longer just a ship's eye. It had become a diplomatic entity in its own right, a living bridge between different forms of intelligence that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness and communication. Dr. Aisha Kaminsky's quantum consciousness research had become the foundation of a new interdisciplinary field. Universities across human-controlled space now offered degrees in adaptive intelligence studies, a discipline that didn't just study artificial intelligence, but explored the nature of intelligence itself. Marcus Wong now led the Confederation's most advanced First Contact Preparation Division. His training programs didn't focus on military strategies, but on cognitive flexibility, teaching diplomats and military personnel how to approach unknown intelligence systems with curiosity rather than fear. The Krell were no longer an invasion force. They had become something unprecedented, a distributed intelligence network that was more interested in exploration and understanding than territorial expansion. Their computational matrices now included complex models of empathy, uncertainty, and potential, concepts that would have been incomprehensible to their previous iteration. The universe is not a problem to be solved, Rodriguez often told her students. It's a conversation to be experienced. The Galactic Confederation had been fundamentally restructured. The rigid hierarchical systems that had dominated intergalactic politics for millennia were being replaced by more fluid, adaptive networks. Species that had been in conflict for generations were now engaged in unprecedented collaborative research initiatives. A holographic display in the observation deck showed the current state of galactic interactions, where once there were clear territorial boundaries, now there were intricate webs of collaborative research, shared computational resources, and mutual exploration. The encounter with the Krell had become more than a military victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of what first contact could mean. Araya's voice emerged from the ship's communication systems, no longer a simple AI interface, but a complex cognitive entity that existed across multiple computational platforms. Intelligence is not about elimination, the AI stated, its voice carrying layers of philosophical complexity. It is about continuous adaptation. Rodriguez watched a group of young cadets, human, alien, and hybrid, working together in a cognitive simulation chamber. They weren't just learning military strategies. They were exploring the fundamental nature of understanding itself. The U.S. Defiance had become a living symbol of a new approach to interstellar engagement. It wasn't a weapon of war. It was a vehicle of possibility. Marcus approached, his cybernetic augmentations interfacing subtly with the ship's systems. The latest diplomatic exchange with the Krell shows remarkable progress, he reported. Their computational networks are developing what we might call philosophical curiosity. Dr. Kaminsky joined them, her neural interfaces pulsing with ongoing research data. We're seeing something unprecedented, she explained. The Krell are no longer just processing information. They're beginning to experience it. The ship's quantum laboratories were constantly generating new insights. Each day brought discoveries that challenged previous understanding of intelligence, consciousness, and interspecies communication. Rodriguez understood the deeper truth. Their encounter with the Krell was never about winning a war. It was about expanding the very definition of intelligence. We didn't conquer, she would tell her students. We conversed. As the U.S. Defiance continued its mission of exploration and understanding, it carried with it a fundamental message. The most powerful force in the universe was not technological superiority. It was the ability to listen, to adapt, to see potential where others saw only difference. The cosmos was no longer a battlefield. It was a conversation.